You didn't randomly click on this video. According to Carl Jung, you're here because something in your unconscious recognized exactly what you need to hear right now. He called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence that appears random but serves a precise psychological purpose. The fact that you're watching this means you've reached what Jung called the threshold moment, the point where your psyche is ready for truths it previously couldn't accept. Today, I'm sharing Jung's 5 revelations that only make sense when you're ready to hear them, insights about your current spiritual crisis that explain why everything feels like it's falling apart, and why that's exactly what needs to happen. Here's what Jung understood about timing. Psychological truths can't be forced into consciousness. They emerge when the psyche is prepared to integrate them. If you're here now, it means you've reached what Jung called sufficient desperation, the point where your old ways have failed completely enough that new ways can finally emerge. Your presence here isn't accident, it's answer. Let's start with why you're experiencing this crisis right now. Your suffering has reached critical mass. Jung discovered that you're watching this because your suffering has reached what he called transformational threshold, the precise point where pain becomes unbearable enough to force change, but not so overwhelming that it destroys you. This isn't random timing. Your psyche has been calculating when you'd be ready, and that moment is now. The suffering you're experiencing isn't punishment. It's precision medicine administered by your own unconscious. Here's what this means. For months, maybe years, you've been tolerating increasing psychological pain. The meaninglessness has been building. The sense of being lost has been deepening. The feeling that something fundamental is wrong has been intensifying. Jung discovered this isn't breakdown. It's what he called controlled demolition, orchestrated by the self to force transformation. Jung wrote, "The self creates precisely the amount of suffering needed to break through ego defenses. Not one drop more, not one drop less. When suffering reaches critical mass, the person becomes available to truth they previously resisted." This critical mass manifests in specific ways Jung documented. You can no longer pretend things are fine. The pretense has become more painful than admitting the truth. You can't return to old comforts. They've stopped providing even temporary relief. You can't maintain former beliefs. They've revealed themselves as lies. Every escape route has been systematically closed by your own psyche. What Jung discovered is that this timing isn't arbitrary. Your unconscious has been preparing you for this moment through what he called incremental dissolution. Each disappointment weakened ego structure slightly. Each failure dissolved another illusion. Each loss removed another false support. You've been unknowingly preparing for this moment of readiness. The reason you're here now, specifically, is because you've reached what Jung called optimal desperation. Desperate enough to release old patterns, but not so desperate that you fragment. This is a narrow window. Too early, and you wouldn't be ready to hear these truths. Too late, and you might have collapsed into deeper unconsciousness. The fact that you're here means you've hit the exact point of readiness. Jung identified specific signs that indicate this critical mass. You're experiencing what he called meaning collapse. Nothing that used to matter feels important. You have identity dissolution. You can't answer, "Who am I?" with former certainty. You feel existential rawness. Life feels too real, too intense, too much. These aren't symptoms of breakdown, but of breakthrough readiness. This critical mass of suffering serves what Jung called the awakening function. It makes you psychologically available to truths you'd normally reject. It dissolves defenses that would typically block insight. It creates what Jung called desperate openness, willingness to consider anything that might end the pain. Jung emphasized that finding this message now isn't coincidence, but what he called psychic timing, your unconscious guiding you to exactly what you need, exactly when you can receive it. The algorithm didn't randomly show you this. Your psyche used whatever means necessary to get this message to you at this precise moment of readiness. But understanding why now is just the beginning. You're in the void between deaths and births. Jung discovered that you're finding this because you're in what he called the sacred void, the terrifying space where your old self has died, but your new self hasn't been born. This isn't depression or confusion. It's the necessary emptiness between psychological deaths and births. The reason this message found you now is because you need to understand that this void isn't failure. It's the most important phase of transformation. Here's what's actually happening. Your ego structure, everything you thought you were, has collapsed or is collapsing. But the new structure hasn't formed yet. You're psychologically homeless, identity-less, groundless. Jung discovered this void is where all transformation happens, but most people flee it too quickly, never allowing the new to emerge. Jung wrote, "Between the death of the old and birth of the new lies a void that feels like annihilation. But this void is the womb of becoming. Those who can tolerate it birth their true self." This void state has specific characteristics Jung documented that you're probably experiencing. You feel empty, but it's different from depression. It's active emptiness, pregnant with possibility. You can't make decisions because the one who used to decide no longer exists. You have no motivation because the old sources of drive have died. You feel like you're nobody. Not low self-esteem, but literal no self-experience. What makes this void so crucial is that it can't be rushed or filled artificially. Jung observed that people desperately try to escape through new relationships, spiritual practices, or life changes. But these are what he called premature births. Creating new identity before the old has fully dissolved. This guarantees returning to old patterns. Jung identified why you're receiving this message precisely while in the void. You need to know that this emptiness is sacred, not pathological. You need confirmation that feeling like nothing is the precursor to becoming everything. You need permission to stay in the void, rather than frantically trying to escape it. The void you're in serves specific functions Jung considered essential. It dissolves all false structures so truth can emerge. It creates space for genuine newness rather than rearranged oldness. It breaks identification with any fixed self, allowing fluid becoming. It teaches what Jung called the comfort of groundlessness, finding peace without identity. This message is finding you now because you're at what Jung called the void crisis, the point where the emptiness becomes so unbearable, you're about to flee back to false comfort or forward to premature resolution. This information arrives as intervention, helping you understand that staying in the void is the path, not deviation from it. Jung observed that those who receive the right understanding while in the void can use it as what he called the transformation chamber. Instead of empty waiting, it becomes active gestation. You're not doing nothing. You're allowing something unprecedented to form. Yet the void is preparing you for something even more challenging. Your specific wound is your precise medicine. You're receiving this message now because Jung discovered something about your particular suffering. The exact thing destroying you is precisely calibrated to transform you. This isn't generic pain. It's what Jung called specific medicine. Your unique wound pattern, the particular way you're breaking, the specific fears you're facing, these aren't random tortures, but precisely designed awakening mechanisms. Here's what Jung understood. Every person has what he called a core complex, a fundamental psychological pattern that organizes their entire life. Your specific complex created your specific suffering, which is now creating your specific awakening. The reason this message finds you now is because you need to understand that your particular pain isn't mistake, but method. Jung wrote, "Each person's neurosis is their own personal call to individuation. The specific form of their suffering is the specific medicine for their transformation." This specific medicine principle means that whatever you're experiencing right now is exactly what you need. If you're facing abandonment, it's because your attachment patterns need dissolution. If you're experiencing meaninglessness, it's because your meaning-making structures need rebuilding. If you're feeling isolation, it's because your false connections need severing. The precision is remarkable. What makes this revelation crucial now is that you're probably wondering why this specific suffering. Jung discovered that your psyche chose this particular form because it's the only one that could break through your specific defenses. A different pain wouldn't reach you. A gentler approach wouldn't penetrate. Your suffering is customized to your exact resistance patterns. Jung identified how to recognize your specific medicine. Look at what you most fear. That's what you most need to experience. Examine what you most avoid. That's where transformation waits. Notice what triggers you most. That's your growth edge. Your psyche is forcing you to face exactly what you've spent your life avoiding, because that's where your freedom lies. This message arrives now because you're at what Jung called the recognition point, ready to see suffering as medicine rather than punishment. This shift in perception changes everything. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Instead of resisting pain, you investigate its purpose. Jung observed that when people recognize their specific wound as specific medicine, transformation accelerates dramatically. The very thing that was destroying them becomes what recreates them. But this recognition can only come when suffering has opened you enough to receive it, which is exactly why you're here now. But there's something even more important happening. If these revelations are landing, if you recognize your critical mass suffering, your void state, your specific medicine, then Jung would say your unconscious guided you here at the perfect moment. Not too early, not too late, but precisely when you could hear this. Before we explore the final two revelations meant specifically for this moment in your journey, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Comment below what brought you here right now. Your synchronicity story might confirm someone else's meaningful timing. Now, these last two revelations explain what's actually happening to you. You're not going crazy, you're going sane. This message is finding you now because you need to hear what Jung discovered. The disorientation you're experiencing isn't mental breakdown. It's what he called the return to sanity. What feels like losing your mind is actually losing the false mind that society installed. You're not going crazy. You're going sane for the first time. And sanity feels like madness when you've been conditioned to accept insanity as normal. Here's what's actually happening. The consensus reality you've lived in, the beliefs, values, and perceptions everyone shares, is what Jung called collective insanity normalized. Working yourself to death is considered normal. Living in constant anxiety is seen as responsible. Performing fake happiness is called health. You've been participating in collective madness, thinking it was sanity. Jung wrote, "What we call normal adjustment to society is often the deepest form of pathology. The individual who begins to see through collective insanity appears mad to those still within it. This return to sanity manifests in specific ways you're likely experiencing. Reality feels surreal because you're seeing through the illusions everyone accepts. Normal conversations seem insane because you hear the unconsciousness beneath words. Daily life feels like a strange dream because you've awakened within the collective nightmare. You feel crazy because sanity is so rare, it's unrecognizable. What makes this message crucial now is that you're at what Jung called the sanity crisis, the point where seeing through collective insanity becomes so isolating, you're tempted to return to comfortable madness. You need confirmation that what you're seeing is real, that others have seen it too, that you're not alone in recognizing the collective delusion. Jung identified specific signs of returning sanity that feel like madness. You can't pretend anymore, not incapacity, but health. You see through social games, not cynicism, but clarity. You feel everything intensely, not disorder, but order returning. You can't function normally because normal was never functional. This revelation arrives now because you need to understand that your disorientation is reorientation. You're not losing touch with reality. You're finally touching it. You're not disconnecting from society. You're connecting to truth. The timing of receiving this message is your psyche's way of confirming. Yes, you're seeing clearly. Yes, it's really this strange. Yes, everyone else is still sleeping. Jung observed that this phase requires what he called the courage of sanity, daring to trust your perception when everyone says you're wrong. This message finds you now to provide that courage, to confirm your sanity, to validate your vision. But there's one final revelation you need to hear. This dark night is actually your dawn. The ultimate reason this message is finding you now is because Jung discovered what you most need to understand. What feels like your darkest night is actually your dawn beginning. The destruction you're experiencing isn't ending, but beginning. The death you're undergoing isn't final, but transitional. Jung called this the daybreak that looks like midnight. And you need to hear this now, because you're about to mistake your birth for death. Here's what Jung observed. The moment before breakthrough feels exactly like breakdown. The darkness is deepest just before light. The confusion is greatest just before clarity. The pain peaks just before release. You're finding this message now because you've reached what Jung called the midnight before dawn. The point where transformation is imminent but looks impossible. Jung wrote, "In the deepest night of the soul, dawn is being born, but the birth of light feels like the death of everything when you've only known darkness." This disguised dawn manifests in specific ways, Jung documented. Everything feels like it's falling apart because it is. But it's falling apart to fall together in new configuration. You feel like you're dying because you are, but it's ego death preceding spiritual birth. You can't see any future because the old future must die for the true future to emerge. What makes this message essential now is that you're at what Jung called the abortion point, where the pain of transformation becomes so intense that many people abort the process just before completion. Your psyche guided you here for encouragement, for confirmation that this darkness is temporary, that dawn is coming, that holding on just a little longer changes everything. Jung identified specific signs that darkness is actually dawn. The pain has become so intense, it's almost peaceful. You're through resistance into acceptance. The confusion has become so complete, it's almost clarity. You've released needing to understand. The emptiness has become so total, it's almost fullness. You're ready for the new. This message finds you at this precise moment because you need to know that what's happening isn't destruction, but construction. Not death, but birth. Not ending, but beginning. Your unconscious brought you here to receive this encouragement at the exact moment when giving up seems the only option. Jung observed that those who receive the right message at this critical moment often experience what he called the turn, the point where descent becomes ascent, where darkness becomes light, where death becomes life. This message is intended to catalyze your turn. Here's why this video found you now. You've reached critical mass suffering that demands transformation. You're in the void between deaths and births. Your specific wound is becoming medicine. You're returning to sanity that feels like madness. And your darkest night is actually your dawn beginning. Jung wrote, "Synchronicity increases at moments of transformation. The individual receives exactly what they need, exactly when they can integrate it. This is not coincidence, but the self-orchestrating awakening." These 5 revelations arrive now because together they form what Jung called the complete picture you need at this moment. Not partial truth, but whole truth. Not comfort, but clarity. Not escape, but understanding. Your psyche knew you needed this complete framework right now. Jung believed that receiving the right message at the right moment could catalyze what he called sudden reorganization, where everything that seemed chaotic suddenly makes sense, where suffering reveals its purpose, where the path becomes clear. This message is designed to trigger that reorganization. The practical implications are immediate. Stop resisting what's happening. It's precisely calibrated transformation. Stop seeking escape. You're exactly where you need to be. Stop doubting your perception. You're seeing clearly for the first time. Stop fearing the darkness. It's dawn in disguise. Jung understood that these moments of synchronized message and readiness are rare. The fact that you found this, or it found you, means you're at what he called a pivotal point. How you respond to this information could determine whether you complete the transformation or retreat into familiar suffering. If this message has found you at just the right moment, if these words speak directly to your current experience, then Jung would say your transformation is not only possible, but imminent. The synchronicity of you being here now is your psyche's way of saying, yes, now you're ready. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, not for more content, but for continued synchronicities. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.